Now, we are joined on the line all the way from the US of A. We have author Gerald Weaver to discuss his new novel, The Girl and the Sword. It's out and available now. Gerald, it's a pleasure to have you on BBC Radio London. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. It's good to be back on BBC London. I always enjoy talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. Of course, for your fans, many of us will know you, of course, the author of Gospel Prism and The First Gentleman. It's a historical novel, The Girl and the Sword. Set the context, because my understanding is set in 1225. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And I wrote the novel because I wanted to strike a blow for love. There's a archaic phrase that behind every every great man is a great woman. Well, I think it actually is more like almost every great man's accomplishment or great woman's accomplishment arises from a couple, from a strong partnership. So I wanted to take that kind of partnership and place it into this historical context. And I also think women have been shortchanged by history because they've been denied the means to change history. And then, of course, men have written them out of history. So I wanted to create a strong female character in this very important historical context that modern readers can relate to. She is very modern. She's strong and she's bold. And the reason she's that way is she was raised in this Cathar Christian sect which treated women as equal to men. So she forms this partnership with Simon de Montfort, who is this amazing historical figure from the middle of the 13th century who does not nearly get his due.
And when you're doing your research for this book, did you have an idea of her fully formed, or did she develop as you were doing your research as a character?
It developed,
right?
And one of the reasons is that, first of all, the book is doing incredibly well. It's like number one Amazon Kindle sale in
that's amazing
in medieval history, and it's also in biographical literary fiction. It's the number one new release, and the people react to the strong female character.
Yeah,
but Americans, such as myself, really react to Simon de Montfort because he ran a proto-democracy in the middle of the 13th century in England. And for us, we look at that and people, their jaws drop. And if you read the reviews, everybody says, I can't believe I don't know this story already. And it was incredibly remarkable. I mean, he was sort of selected by his nobles to stand up to a capricious and volatile king, and he did that. And in the meantime, he wrote a thing called the Provisions of Oxford and Westminster, which were really a sort of a constitution. They were a detailed version of the Magna Carta.
That's amazing. All that history, I mean, all of that research, and then you had to match him with this, the female character that can stay toe-to-toe and also carry the story along.
Yes, she's the narrative thread. Yeah. But, the more I read about him, the more I couldn't believe. For instance, he not only wrote this constitution, but when he defeated the king in the battle, he did not do what I would have done, or what England has had 7 usurpers. He didn't kill the king. He created this democracy. He set up the first parliament elected with commoners, and amazing. And then on top of that, when he went to the Holy Land, he basically recaptured Jerusalem without a battle. The Kingdom of Jerusalem asked him to be their regent. And when he passed through France, the Kingdom of France asked him to be their regent. He must have been an incredibly charismatic figure with a great deal of integrity. So,
it just shows that the victors write the history in their image, and if we don't do the research and hear stories like this from yourself, these characters or these historic figures are lost to us, aren't they?
Right, and you would have to imagine, the moment that Simon de Montfort died, the royalist powers began an extensive and century-long campaign to discredit him, because most of the church wanted to make him a saint, and he was incredibly popular. When he fought the king, the militia of London, basically all the people of London, fought on his side.
Wow!
But the last thing that the monarchy wanted was this Saint democracy,
of course,
right? You know, with this incredible image, you know. So they did everything good to bury his story.
When you're putting all of this, you know, historic content and, you know, this character who was definitely living and putting it into a narrative with a beginning, middle, and an end. How many drafts did you go through before you ended up with the book that you sort of thought, right, I'm sort of done now, or I'm never going to be done, so I have to stop?
That's a very good question. So I had to do it about 3 times, and because the first time, as you might imagine, it was just loaded with historical detail. And this is an incredible, interesting period. And you know, this is, you know, when they invented soap. This is Lady Godiva. Yeah. This is when, you know, when they had invented chess, the Inquisition. I mean, all these things came right in the middle of the 13th century. Right. And you know, I just had to take a lot of that out, and then whatever I kept in, it had to be part of a narrative, or part of a dialogue, or something that would not slow down the story. So yeah, it took me about three drafts to do that.
That's amazing. And then when you finally look at the book now, are the characters still hovering around you, or have they gone to bed?
Well, actually, it's a funny thing you should say, because the female character is based on several women I know, and I think they're walking around now, or they've gone to bed. But it's one. That's one of the things about her. Is it's sort of because she grew up in this, you know, women were equal Christian sect. Yeah, she's just like a modern woman. So the modern readers can relate to her. But yeah, she's like my wife or my daughter or a particular friend I have who is very opinionated and very strong-willed, and like all the things that Pauline of Pamiers is in my book.
And because of the way that the book is written historically, is there a hope for a prequel, maybe, or even a sequel to this, or some kind of side story that you can delve into? Because you have got a wealth of, I guess, research there, and I'm sure it can develop into more. Is there thoughts of that or not?
Well, actually, there are several stories that come out of it. You know, the Edward the First, who was the Hammer of the Scots, Longshanks, he was the son of Henry III, and Simon de Montfort was, among all the many things he was obviously a very appealing and attractive man, because King Henry's chaste widowed sister fell in love with him. Right. So de Montfort was also Edward I's uncle. Oh. So when Edward I came into power, everything he did had nothing to do with his father Henry III. It was all in emulation of his uncle Simon de Montfort. He created a thing called the Model Parliament, which was basically sort of what de Montfort had done. The Parliament in the past had always been like a curia. They were advisors, but then de Montfort and Edward set it up to stand alone and have its own rights and powers. And then, of course, he was a great soldier like de Montfort was, and he subdued Wales and temporarily subdued Scotland. And he also sort of codified the common law, which is what de Montfort did with the provisions of Oxford and Cambridge. So that's a perfect sequel, is the way in which, and I hint at this in the book, the way in which Edward more or less followed in the footsteps of his uncle and not his father.
Something, you know, as you are talking, and first you're able to contextualize a lot of, I guess, the background work that you have done. But the beauty of your books, without a shadow of a doubt, Gerald, is very much how you're able to paint a picture. And so I wonder, do you see this book, The Girl and the Sword, or perhaps some of your others, turning into, a show on a streaming service, or is that something that you would like to see for these books?
Oh, well, it's inevitable to see this, read this book and see it. You have to see it almost as like an 8-part limited series.
Absolutely.
But it goes over 40 years, and it's the characters are compelling, and different characters come in and out, and it is exactly that. It's a little bit too long and involved to be a movie, but it's not anything longer than a short series, I think. Yeah.
Well, a huge.
I have friends who want to cast the characters.
Well, I imagine so. I think that's the beauty of a book, is when you're so engulfed, you can see the person playing the role. The name of the book, of course, is The Girl and the Sword. It is out and available now in all good bookstores. And a real pleasure having you on the show, Gerald, and a huge congratulations on this latest book. Thank you for joining us tonight.
And thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And the book strikes a blow for love, so I hope people enjoy reading it.
I suspect they certainly will, and we can't wait to hear about the possible Netflix or Amazon or whichever streaming service pickup it is in the next 12 months. Thank you for joining us today. Pleasure having you on the show. Gerald Weaver, the author of The Girl and the Sword.